as we have discussed something about forecasting in the initial part, so we all know that how we were able to predict certain values or forecast certain values for the next set of elements. Similar to the forecast, there is something which will help us to predict the outcomes or reach to a particular set of values. That is nothing but what if analysis. So we'll try to understand that what if analysis, what it is, why it is used, and how it is being used into the market. Now, when I discuss about what if analysis, as the name suggests, what if? What if means what if a particular criteria, a condition, a scenario is asked for us, and that I have to analyze or generate certain outcome for the same. So that's when we will try to take help of something called as what if analysis. So I will analyze the data, I will analyze the report, I'll analyze the outcome, what if a particular criteria, condition or scenario is met. So if I want to discuss something about what if analysis, before discussing about that, let's try to understand how it will be useful for us. Imagine that I'm an analyst for a company and it's a book publishing company. So every month on month, they publish a book into the market and they have to see how much profit, how much revenue has been generated by that particular book. So this particular month, they have published one book which is costing around 500 rupees. And they have to find out certain answers for some of the questions which come into the mind. So as I'm an analyst for the company, the manager or the stakeholder of the company comes to me and asks me these two questions. The very first question which he is asking is, what is the profit generated after selling 100 items? Which means he wants to know what kind of profit would be generated when I sell 100 units into the market. Now obviously, as I said, that this book is published in the market this particular month and it is costing me around 500 rupees. So when I sold 100 units of that particular book, it would be 500 into 100. That's nothing but 550,000. But this 50,000, I cannot say that it's a profit. It's the revenue being generated. So we will try to analyze and calculate the profit for the same with the help of what if analysis. Now, as I was not knowing that what I want to generate in the outcome, this 100 units is something that what if the 100 units are sold into the market, what will be the profit generated? So here you can see, as per the topic which we are going to study, I'm analyzing the report, I'm analyzing the outcome, what if the criteria met is 100 units. So similar to that, the stakeholder came to me again and he's asking me that what will be the profit or how many units I have to sold in order to get a profit of 1 lakh. So for that particular reason, I don't know how many units needs to be sold. I just know that I want to reach to a profit of 1 lakh rupees. So for that particular reason, let's see how my what if analysis is going to help me over the same. So if I want to discuss about what if analysis will help me to change the values of the cells or the formulas or the outcome in order to get certain result set, which will help me to give out certain conclusion, which will help me to derive certain information, and also it will help me to give certain stimulated outcome. So whenever we talk about what if analysis will always have three major factors taken into consideration. The very first, scenario. As the name suggests, scenario means some conditions, some criteria set into the mind. As we know, scenario into the real world, there will be scenario generated into the data and we'll try to analyze the outcome based on certain scenarios. So for that, we have something called a scenario or a scenario manager. Second thing which we have is data table. So I have a table for which I have to generate an outcome, and that's when I take help of something called as data table. And the third thing which I have into over here is nothing but goal C. As you see by the name, goal C. Goal is nothing but a target and C is I want to achieve that target. So how I would be able to achieve that target which is set according to me. So that's what we are going to see in terms of what if analysis. Let's go to our data and see how we will be able to solve or how we will be able to use scenarios, data tables as well as goal seek over here. So, as I have said you earlier that I'm an analyst for a company which publishes book into the market, and this particular month they have published a book which is costing around 500 rupees in the as a selling price for the same. Now what I'm going to see, I'm going to see how much would be the profit generated by the same. So when I know that price is 500 and the very first question was asked, how much profit would be generated when there are 100 units sold. So for that, let's try to see what is the total revenue generated for the same. So for the revenue, I'm doing this into price into the quantities. So I have one book costing me around 500 rupees. So 100 books will obviously be costing around 500 into 100. That's nothing but 50,000. But if someone is asking me, is this my profit? No. This is a revenue being generated when I sold 500 units, 100 units of book, each costing me around 500 rupees. So when I talk upon a production cost, now these guys are saying that whatever revenue is generated, 15% is the production cost. So let's see what's the 15% of the data. So I'll take this data, and 15% is nothing but my production cost. So the 15% production cost is 7,500 rupees. So each item on and all costed me around 200 rupees as an actual price, as an actual cost. Now that was a cost price, but obviously I will not sell my book on 200 rupees. My selling price is 500 rupees, but the cost of producing the book is around 200 rupees. So let's see the item cost, 100 units into 200 rupees. So the item cost is around 20,000 for me over here. Now let's see what is the total cost generated over here. So the total cost which I got, the item was costing me around 20,000 with a production cost of 7,500. So this is a total cost which was taken into consideration when I was publishing or when I was using or utilizing certain materials and on into the market. So as you can see, 27,500 is the total cost which has been calculated over here, and the revenue which I have generated by selling 100 units of book is around 50,000. So my profit would be the revenue minus the total cost, and the remaining amount is going to be my profit. So let's see what is the profit generated by the same. So if I do equals to, revenue is this minus the total costing is this. So when I enter, so you can see the total profit is around 22,500. So when I am selling 100 units of book, where each book is costing me around 500 rupees, so the total profit which is going to be generated for me is around 22,500 rupees. Now the first question which was asked to me by the stakeholders has been solved over here. That is, what will be the profit generated when I sold 100 units of books. So that's what we have got over here. But what if the stakeholders comes to me again and he has certain scenarios into his mind? What are certain scenarios? Certain possibilities. Obviously, he will be having that into mind. So what are the certain possibilities when he came again to me? He asked me that what if I'm selling 200 units of book, what would be my profit generated? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep 200 over here, and you could see the profit changing because I've referred the cells over here in terms of calculation. So obviously when I change the values in the cells, the values in the formula and the outcome is obviously going to change for me. Now he came up with again a scenario that what if I am selling 300 units over here? So I'll do 300. So it's giving me 67,500. Now what if I'm selling 400 units over here? So what's the scenario? What's the outcome? What's the profit being generated at a scenario of 400 units being sold? 90,000. Imagine that he's selling around how many units of items? 500. So what would be the profit generated over here? 1,12,500 rupees. So here if you can see, when I am changing all the possible values which came into the stakeholder's mind, I am generating some amount of profit. But I cannot see all the result sets which are there. Let's get back to 100, and that's the profit when I sold 100 units of item. Now there were certain scenarios which were there into his mind, that what if I sold 200 units, 300 units, 400 units, and so on. So let's try to keep these scenarios into measure, and let's try to calculate on the basis of that fixed scenarios that how the values would be changing into an analysis which will help us to analyze it better instead of putting it one by one over here. So let's try to take help of something called as what if analysis. So here if you go in the data tab, you can see a forecast group. Now you know that each ribbon has certain groups. So this group name is known as forecast. Forecast means predict. Obviously here I don't know what is going to be the outcome. I'm just predicting it on the basis of certain changes in the value. So what kind of prediction I'm going to look out over here? Predictions on the basis of different possibilities and scenarios. So let's try to see how it is going to be helpful for me. So in the forecast group, there is something called as what if analysis. If I hover over here, you can see it tries out various values or changes in the values in order to generate certain outcome based on a formula or a function. And here you can see it is taking help of three major factors. The very first is scenario, the second is goal C, and the third is data tables for us. Let's see one by one. So if I go in the first one is nothing but scenario manager. As you know, scenarios are the possibilities which are required to be considered over here in order to generate some result sets. So let's see what are the possibilities. So here you can see different groups of values or scenarios and switch between them. That's the possibility which is being calculated. So let me click on scenario. There is no particular scenario being added. There is no particular possibility being created over here. Let's create it from scratch. So if I want to create a scenario, I'll do an add. So the first thing which is asking me over here is a scenario name. Now what is the scenario name which I want to give? Scenario name, let's say 200 units sold. So that's the first scenario. Changing cell. What cells should change? I should change quantities over here. That's when I'll get my output. I'll do F4 and I'll keep it as a normal cell. I'm not referring it as such. You can refer it or you can keep it as a normal cell. Now, here, comment. Now in this comment, I can add what I wanted to do over here in terms of generating an outcome or for this particular scenario. So I say this is generating profit amount when 200 units of items or books are sold in market. So that's the comment which I have entered over here and I do OK. So when I do OK, it is asking me for a fixed value. What is a fixed value over here? That's 200 over here. And I do OK. So you can see there is one scenario being added over here. And when I do show, you can see when I show this particular scenario, you can see the values are changing. I didn't went at that particular location and I entered the value. A scenario has helped me over there. So similarly, let's try to add in few more scenarios over here. Now, as we saw that when I just selected that scenario which I created, the value has automatically changed. Now let's try to create few more scenarios which came into the mind of the stakeholders, and let's see how the values have changed on the basis of each scenario. So I'm going over here and I'm adding one more scenario. The scenario is when there were 300 units sold. So I'll write the scenario name as 300 units sold. What is the changing cell for me? This is the changing cell for me again. I'll make it as a normal cell. That's it. And what is the comment which I want to add? The profit amount generated after selling 300 units of books. That's what I do. Okay. And here I have to set up a fixed value. What's the fixed value over here? 300. Now I can go again over here and add instead of putting it okay. So one more scenario would be created. Let's say 400 units sold. G6, that's going to change over here. And then J6, that's going to change over here. And you can see comment. If you want, you can add. If you want to avoid, you can avoid the comment as well. So I can write the profit amount generated after selling 400 units of books. And I do okay. What's the fixed value which I want to set up over here as 400, and I do okay. So there are 3 scenarios being created. Obviously, as per the question, it is 100. The second value is, let's say, 200 units sold, 300 units sold, and 400 units sold. So these were certain scenarios which came into the stakeholder's mind, and he wanted to see what will be the profit generated when I have a possibility of selling 200 units, 300 units and 400 units. So for 200 we have seen how does it looks. For 300 units, if I do show, you can see this is how it is changing. For 400 units, you can do show, and this is how it is changing. So on the basis of each scenario which is being created over here, you can see how the profit is being calculated. So there is some change of values in the cells happening, and based on that, an outcome needs to be generated. I was not knowing that what is going to be the particular outcome. So on the basis of different scenario, it is going to predict my profit which is being calculated over here. So you can see 200, 300 units sold, and whatever description I have written, that has been given over here. So if I close, let's say I'll make it what? 100. For 100, initially this is what the profit was, and let's try to go in what if analysis in scenario manager. And instead of doing this, show one at a time for each scenario, let me create something called as summary. Now what will the summary do? Summary will create a summarized report of all the scenarios which are there. So I'll do summary. Result set is this. This is what the result is which I require after changing these values, and I do okay. And here you can see current value, which means in the what if analysis sheet, what is the current value of the changing cell for me? The current value of the changing cell is 100. And on the basis of that 100, what is the profit? What's the outcome being generated? 22,500. So here if you see in the scenario manager, 100 units paid, there is 22,500 as a profit being generated. What if the next scenario which I created, what was the next scenario? The next scenario was 200 units sold. You can see the name of the scenarios are also being similar. So 200 units sold, 300 units sold, 400 units sold. So if someone wants to analyze in terms of this kind of report, it will be very easy for them if they have certain scenarios in their mind in order to create certain outcomes. So here you can see 200 units sold. What is the profit being generated? 45,000. 300, 67,500. And 400, it's 90,000. But changing cell, how I will get to know that this cell J6 is having quantities? How I'll get to know that this is something called as profit? Because I know this is what I have created, but there is another person. If I share this sheet with someone else or to the stakeholders, he can see the result, but he will not understand what is this J6 and what is this result set. So in order to quickly modify it, let's try to do something. First, let me delete this sheet. So I'm deleting this sheet and I'll go in what if analysis. Here, this is a changing cell. I know that quantity 100 is my changing cell and profit is the result set after changing that particular cell. That's what I have to create. So here I go over here. I'll go in name box. Instead of writing it as J6, I will mention it as quantity. And I enter. So when I select this cell, the name of that particular cell is not J6 anymore. It's something called as quantity. Similar to this cell, this is the result after changing that particular cell. So this result cell is what is profit. So I'll write this and I do OK. So instead of this cell, now this cell named is as profit. So let's try to create a summary again. I'll go in what if analysis, scenario manager. I'll go to the summary. I'll create it in a new sheet and you can see. Now instead of J6, J dollar, $6 or J dollar and $12 as such, what it is going to give me? It is going to give me that cell named as what? Quantity. This cell named as what? Profit for me. And here you can see current means when I am creating the summary, the current value of quantities is 100 quantities sold. So the profit being generated is 22,500. Similarly, if I am selling 200 units of item, the profit being generated is 45,000. 300 units, 67,500, and for 400 units, it's 90,000 in profit. So it shows how on the basis of different possible scenarios which came into the stakeholder's mind, we are able to give him certain analysis, certain outcome. So this is how our scenario manager will help us for the same. So this was all about scenario manager. For different scenarios, it will help us to calculate certain results set. And we have seen how it has calculated for the same. So let's go on the sheet and what is the next thing which I want to do? As per the first question, what is the profit generated after selling 100 units? We were able to solve and tackle the problem. But there was one more question, that when I am going to achieve a profit of around 1 lakh, which means how many units needs to be sold if I want to achieve a profit of 1 lakh rupees. Obviously, I don't know how many units needs to be sold. So I try to do and I try to check it manually. For 100 units sold, the profit is around 22,500. Let's say for 200 units sold, the profit is around 45,000. Let's say if I say 350 units sold, the profit is around 78,750. If I say 800 units sold, the profit is going beyond 1 lakh. Here, if I say 34 units sold is around 7,650. If I say that I am selling 400 units, what's the profit being calculated? 90,000. Now, if I have 450 units sold, the profit being calculated is 1,01,250. Which means if I check it manually, it will become difficult for me to analyze that when I am going to achieve this particular target. So, for that particular problem statement, we have something called as goal C. Now, what is the meaning of goal C? As the name suggests, goal. Goal is nothing but the target. Seek. Seek is nothing but I am going to achieve that target. I am going to seek that target. So, how I am going to achieve the target or seek the target over here? So, for that, in the what if analysis, we have something known as goal C. So, let me change it 100 again and let's see how goal seek works. So, here when I go on goal seek, finds the right input for the value you want, which means I don't know what is going to be the quantity sold for that particular item if I want to generate a price of or a profit amount of 1 lakh rupees. So, here an input needs to be calculated and I am not going to do it manually. I'll let my Excel to do it for the same. So find the right input for the value you want. So we are going to find out the right input for the value which we require over here. So for this, let's see how are we going to achieve this goal. That is, how are we going to seek this goal. In order to do it, let's click on goal seek. Now goal seek will have 3 parameters. First is set value. Now what is the meaning of set value? What value I want to set means what value I want to show, where the target needs to be achieved. So what value I want to set? I want to set this cell, and this cell is nothing but calculating me the profit. So that's the set value. This value needs to be set, needs to be achieving which target. So to value, what value I want to set it? I want to set this into 1 lakh. So that's the value which I want. Now, when I am telling that profit is what you want to set, into how many value? You want to set it in 1 lakh rupees. Now, 1 lakh as a profit. Now, what cell should I ideally change? Which cell should I ideally change? The quantities, because I know the price of the book is going to be fixed. Production cost, anyhow, revenue ka 15% is being calculated. Item cost is for the number of units. It will have a particular item cost of 200, the cost price, and that is being calculated, the total cost. From this, the total cost is being calculated, and then the profit is being generated for the same. So I want to set the profit into 1 lakh by changing what? Obviously, I'll be changing what? Changing the quantities. So I've selected it and I do OK. When I do OK, you can see that goal seeking with cell G12. That is, it is seeking a goal for cell J12 to find a solution. Target value. What was the target value? Which was there? 1 lakh rupees. 1 lakh rupees as a target which I want to achieve. What was the current value when the data was there? Current value was 100 units being sold. So I can cancel. If I cancel, you can see it's back to the basic which was there earlier. So similarly, if I select over here, I'll go on this. I'll go to goal seek, and goal seek, I'll select profit value. What is the profit amount which I want to generate? It's around 1 lakh. By changing which cell? By changing this quantity as a cell, and I do OK. When I do OK, you can see how many quantities needs to be sold in order to generate a profit of 1 lakh. That has been calculated over here. But one thing, I'll do OK. But one thing to keep in mind is items, the number of quantities. Will it ever be into decimal? That is, it is showing me 444.444 something, which means that it was not one finite quantity, it was showing a decimal. That could possibly happen into my data. So I need to avoid it before taking it into my analysis, because keeping data into proper format is much more required. So when I go on this quantity, let's say I'll use a function known as roundup. Roundup is a function which will help me to round up the value and go to the highest element. So what it is going to give me? 445 units which needs to be sold if I want to generate a profit of around 1 lakh. So 1,125,000 is the profit being calculated after selling this. It was earlier 444.44, but with the help of roundup, it has rounded up to the other value. You can do this, or one more thing which you could do is remove the decimals. So it has removed the decimals, and you can see the profit is still around 1 lakh for me. So this is how I have used goal C. Now I can say that if I am selling 100 units, what should be the price of the product in order to reach to a profit of 2 lakhs. So I'll go in data tab, forecast, goal C, goal C. This is a value which I want to see. To which value? 2 lakh. By changing cell. Which cell I need to change? Now let's say price. I want to fix the quantities. The quantities are going to be 100 units only. But the price is fluctuating over here. So price, I've done it, and when I do OK, here you can see price needs to be 2,588 rupees when you are selling 100 units of item in order to get a profit of 2 lakh. So this is how a goal seek has been helpful for me in terms of analysis. So when I talk upon goal seek is achieving this goal. So there was a goal which I required to be achieved, and we were able to predict certain values which will be essential for me in order to predict the goals or in order to predict the outcome. So this was what if analysis, and this was all about the goal seek as an option into the what if analysis. Now there is something called as data table. So sees the results of multiple inputs at the same time, which means we have seen the result of multiple scenarios at same time in this particular part. But similarly, you can see in that what if analysis as well. Now here I'm creating. Now here what I'm doing, I'm taking equals to and this cell value. Never copy it as it is. If you do Control C and then paste it over here, it's not going to make sense. Why? Because the reference is not being matched. There are blank rows coming in between. So what I can do is I'll do equals to and this value profit. You can see it's 22,500 which is being created. Now I want to see how many units, how many price was being generated. They're selling 200, 300 units, 400 units, 450 units and 500 units. So for this, I am not creating different scenarios just like we did in Scenario Manager. But still I'll be able to do this task. Let's see how. So here, if you can see, this is a table and this is a quantity where this calculation is happening. And this is the total profit which is being generated after selling each particular set of units. Now let's see how it is going to be helpful for me in terms of data table. So for this data table, I'll select this entire range where I want to copy the values, and in the what if analysis sheet, there is a data table. So I'll select data table. Now the data is not with respect to rows, it's with respect to columns because it's one after another. So column cell, let's say this is what I want, and you could see, okay, this is what is being created over here. So for 200, for 300, for 400, for 500 and for 600. This is a data table. So as we have seen that how we can generate different scenario based outcomes, how we can reach to a particular goal or seek to a particular goal into the data, what values changes are required, how the input value needs to be changed. This is what we have understood over here. And similarly, let's try to see the third approach which is possibly available to us is nothing but the data table. Now data table will give me the table wise information or the table wise outcome for my analysis. Let's see how. If you have seen in the scenario manager, in the scenario manager, for different scenarios, we generated an outcome, a summary sheet into a different sheet for us. Now, in what if analysis, let's try to see a data table, and for those particular scenarios only, let's try to generate an outcome of profit. So, I'll create a data table. So, I'm taking this profit. If I do Control C and I paste it over here, it's going to be problematic. It's going to show me a reference error. Now, what is this reference error and why it is being causing over here? Because if you see, it is referring to a cell. It's referring to a blank cell which is being considered over here, and that needs not to be there. So, instead of copying and pasting the value over here, what I am going to do is I am going to refer to this cell. So, if the values are changing over there, the reference has been created over here. So, the same value changes would happen over here. So, if I do profit, now here I am not inserting anything. I am inserting how many units? 200, then 300, then 400, and then there is something called as 500 as a units being sold. And let's see, let's calculate the profit for the same. So, I have selected this entire data table where I want to generate an outcome of profit for each number of units being sold. So, I've selected this. I'll go in the data tab. In the data tab, there is what if analysis, and then there is something called as data tables. So, sees the results of multiple inputs, which means multiple inputs at the same time. So, you can see the results of multiple input in a tabular format at the same time over here. So, data table, you just have to write two values. One is rows input cell, one is column input cell. Now, the data which I want to analyze is in terms of columns. So, I'll try to take help of something called as column input cells. Now, column input cells are selecting this, the quantities which needs to be inputted into this formula in order to work it correctly. So, if I do OK, you can see the profit being generated. Let me format it. So, here I am formatting it and removing these decimals. So, for 200 units sold, the profit is going to be 45,000. For 300 units sold, it's 67,000. For 400 units sold is 90,000. And for 500 units sold is 1,12,500 rupees. So, this is what the total revenue being generated after selling each particular unit item. So, this was about the data table which we were talking about and which we were discussing about. So, this is how we were able to predict something. We were able to find out what if a particular criteria needs to be satisfied, what if this scenario is met, what if we want to achieve this target or this goal in terms of reaching the data, how many changes and tweaks are required for the same. So, for this, we are doing something called as what if analysis. So, here we have understood a simple approach of how does what if analysis work, how it is useful for us, and how it makes help for analysis of something. So, as the name suggests, what if analysis, it will analyze what if a given criteria is possibly satisfied in the data or outside the data for us. So, that's when we have something called as what if analysis, which will help me to forecast and predict the outcome for the same. So, this was all about what if analysis. I hope it is understandable to you all.
Like this video, subscribe to our channel and comment on the concept you want to learn next.